It feels like the worse a national tragedy is, the worst comes out in people. And of course, I'm talking about the hundreds who are injured, the dozens who are no longer with us on this earth for simply wanting to view a concert in Las Vegas. While I sit here trying to carefully watch my words or my tweets or my Facebook statuses to try not to offend or hurt anyone during this time of mourning, during this time of trauma and pain for hundreds of people, other people are not really doing that, and they deserve to be called out. So in this video, we are going to be talking about the mainstream media and also parts of the independent media that we're going to call out that are really cancers on this society, and not only how they need to be stopped, but how we could actually help with that, which I'm going to bring up at the end of this video and actually have a timestamp in the description. So if you don't want to watch the rest of this video, you could just skip forward to that very important part that I'm going to get into. What happened in Las Vegas just a few hours ago is a horrific national tragedy, and yet still, people try to make it all about themselves. We see a lot of nitpicking of information, like this tweet that said that the shooter supposedly shouted Trump, and many people on the left saying that this was a white supremacist Trump supporter that committed these heinous acts. We have major news organizations putting the blame on white American men, calling them a bigger domestic threat than Muslim foreigners. There's politicians and pundits who see this suffering and yet still want to use it as a platform to push a political agenda, like we just saw Hillary Clinton, who even herself, with complete lack of hindsight, said that we, quote, must put politics aside, but in the same sentence say stand up to the NRA. And we don't even know the exact details of what exactly happened or how it happened or why it happened, but a lot of the loudest voices right now are the ones who are most disconnected from the emotional suffering that people are going through. Like one of the top executives at CBS, who said, quote, that she had no sympathy for the Vegas victims as they were, as she puts it, country music fans, who are often Republican gun toters. Now, of course, she was just promptly fired because of those public comments that she made on her Facebook page. But the delusion doesn't just spew from the left, but also the right.
The news is lying. FBI HRT did the hit on the guy, and they found Antifa information in the room and photos of the woman in the Middle East. So he did not kill himself. The FBI hostage rescue team killed him because he was firing on them. So he did not want to be taken alive, and reportedly he did it, and it was Antifa crap everywhere. And other things I'm not supposed to mention.
And where is this narrative that fits perfectly into the fear-mongering that this right-wing news organization has been pushing for years now? Where does this information come from? Who put their name behind this baseless claim that this was an Antifa ISIS member? What evidence did they have? And surprise, it's, quote, a deep-level intelligence insider, an anonymous source, not providing any evidence, but very conveniently providing this supposed news organization with the boogeyman of all boogeymans that they could combine together in order to scare the crap out of you, and works conveniently with their business model that is mainly a fear-mongering operation that then sells you survival products. This entire article starts off with their first premise that they use to base on everything, and that is that the Las Vegas Police Department lied, and that this horrible human being didn't kill himself, but was shot and killed by police during a raid. They even have a screenshot of the communication that happened on the police scanner and put gunshot in the official transcript, which, if you actually go to the actual audio of the police scanner at the time, wasn't there.
Copy. All units on the 32nd floor. SWAT has explosive breach. Everyone in the hallway needs to move back. All units move back. Breach.
And I suggest everyone listen to that audio, because you don't hear a gunshot. You don't hear police officers saying shots fired, suspect shot and down. And then they add that 2 officers were injured because of a shootout. Meanwhile, the 2 Las Vegas police officers were struck when the madman was shooting from his window down into the crowd. And during these traumatic mainstream media events, it's impossible to understand who's telling the truth because pundits, personalities, and the media are jumping the gun to make sure that they get enough clicks and revenue from a story that everyone is trying to desperately find out what happened, and they're shifting the blame on either Antifa, white supremacists, ISIS members, NRA members. It doesn't matter, but they will put and blame a group for this without any actual evidence. And there's so many different theories mentioned right now. One of the ones that I criticized could be right, but it's important for you to understand the agenda, what people have to gain from these accusations, but most importantly, how they're doing a huge disservice, hedging their bets so they could be right, and that people will forget about their misrepresentations in the future, and we can't let that happen for a very specific reason that I'm going to get into in just a little bit. And let's also be honest here, governments don't have the best track record with telling the truth during these big major events, and unlike the personalities and media who do it for fame and profit, the government usually does it to hide either their incompetence or compliance during these major events. But moving forward with more details about this event, it is clear that ISIS is supposedly taking responsibility for this, even though the suspect is a 60-year-old white grandfather that the FBI said had no connections to ISIS, and there's actually no evidence for these claims at all, with ISIS having a long history of bragging about actions that they never committed before. We also learned from the brother of this suspect that
no affiliation with anything, as far as we know.
People will be hanging on your every word.
Well, I know, but this is, but there's nothing. That's what this blows. I mean, I used to fix things for a living. I mean, my job was to find the answers, and this is like, what?
Now that's the suspect's own brother, which means you should take his comments with a grain of salt. But even the authorities are baffled at the motive behind this heinous crime that happened. There's another witness to this attack that says that there was an actual lady 45 minutes before the attack that said that she was screaming that, quote, "We were all going to die tonight," which should be looked into but could be accidental. We know the suspect was also a pilot and had 2 planes. His father was an armed robber on the FBI's most wanted list who reportedly had suicidal tendencies and should be considered armed and very dangerous when he was on the FBI most wanted list. We know the suspect also worked for Lockheed Martin, the world's largest defense contractor, about 30 years ago under a predatory company, and that he also recently had very large gambling transactions, where he gambled sometimes more than $10,000 per day, and in some instances greater than $20,000 or $30,000 at Las Vegas casinos, with which some of them he had major lawsuits with. And the details here are still very murky. The government and authorities are being very tight-lipped about what they're finding out because it's an ongoing investigation, and it's impossible for me or for anyone out there in the media business to tell you without certainty this was one group or another, or this was the motivation, unless I'm just totally speculating and taking things out of my buttocks. And I'm not, and I refuse to do that because the truth is more important than anything. And I could sit here and lie and speculate and probably get a lot of views and ad revenue from that, but I would never want to do that on the graves of innocent human beings. And one of the main reasons why I'm making this video is to think about another critical idea that I believe has a lot of truth in it from this forensic psychiatrist, who said,
"We've had 20 years of mass murders, throughout which I have repeatedly told CNN and our other media, if you don't want to propagate more mass murders, don't start the story with sirens blaring.
The school day had only just begun when the attacker struck.
Don't have photographs of the killer.
The 17-year-old's 3-hour rampage ended in his own death.
Don't make this 24/7 coverage.
The German Chancellor is about to give her reaction. We'll bring that to you live.
Do everything you can not to make the body count the lead story.
Carnage in the classroom, 16 people are dead.
Not to make the killer some kind of anti-hero.
Dressed in black combat gear, the gunman opened fire at random.
Do localize this story to the affected community and make it as boring as possible in every other market. Because every time we have intense saturation coverage of a mass murder, we expect to see one or two more within a week.
And that's exactly the coverage that's happening right now with this latest tragedy in Las Vegas. It is being incentivized because of people's clicks, because of people's attention, to be as loose with the facts, as sensational, as emotional. And that's why media executives are talking about not having any sympathy. That's why pundits and politicians are using this as a way to push their agenda, because ultimately, these people are not only making it about themselves, but they're making the situation a lot worse and a lot more dangerous than it should be, while forgetting about the true suffering that's actually happening to individuals and human beings. And you could stop that. You could turn off the television. You could stop clicking clickbait titles that are totally wrong. You could stop supporting media organizations that have a clear bias, a clear agenda, and are driven only by popularity and fame with ad revenue to add to their bolstered ego and pride. Now, understand, you vote with your clicks, and you shouldn't trust anybody. Even myself personally, I made mistakes during major breaking traumatic events to get the jump on my competitors, to be the first to get the story, forgetting the real traumatic events that happened and the people that were suffering. And I made very critical mistakes that I will never forgive myself for. And I promise never to do them again, because they're just wrong. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to your comments on what I'm sure will be a very divisive video. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting real independent media and staying with us during these hard times. I love you.